Welcome back. Now it's time for Lefties Losing It. Let's start, Lefties, with a little frivolity. And, you know, despite the North Korean-style media campaign, the Democrats are in trouble when even Jon Stewart is mocking the DNC and his lefty crowd are lapping it up.
They had a guy yelling, "Screw the billionaires," followed immediately by a very happy billionaire. It's all okay if it's our billionaire. They had guys making fun of people for going to Yale and a bunch of people who went to Yale. The Democrats had people who prosecuted sexual predators and
That was actually funny. I'm as shocked as anybody. Now, I'm not sure what this next clip is, but I find it weird and wrong. Can we stop trying to sexualize kids? Just who is this aimed at?
I am gay. Are you gay? And if not, would you like to try to be gay? We're taking new applications and it's really fun. You get magical powers and free honey buns. Your mom is gay and so is your dad. If you're not gay, it's really too bad.
Weird. You'll remember the infamous reporting from CNN claiming that the BLM riots were fiery but mostly peaceful. What's more peaceful than entire buildings destroyed? But over in the UK, they are also borrowing from this playbook.
And in the last hour, they've given us an update that they've made 38 arrests and recovered 4 knives. And they said a man believed to be in his 20s has been stabbed. His injuries are not life-threatening. But overall, it's been a really peaceful and enjoyable day.
Mostly peaceful and enjoyable stabbings. Wonderful. And guess what? There were a couple more stabbings later that day. Now to more words Lefties losing it want to ban by deeming them racist, akin to using the N-word. It won't surprise you that the list is utterly ridiculous and designed to protect race baiters and DI advocates from criticism.
10 ways you say the N-word without saying the N-word. If you use any of these terms or phrases in reference to Black people, you are just as racist as the person that actually uses the N-word. Here are the words: thug, ghetto, welfare queen, lazy, race baiter, race grifter, threatening, angry, dangerous. Or you say that we're playing the victim or we are a diversity hire. What you actually mean to say is the N-word. Just stop it. If you say these words or phrases, you are calling us the N-word. If you say these ignorant racist terms or phrases around your children, you're also teaching your children to be racist just like you.
Now, more Lefties losing it with my next guest. We heard a lot of lies of the DNC, from Biden repeating the fine people hoax again, to Kamala's Pinocchio performance, to Michelle Obama telling the crowd Trump wants to outlaw IVF. But Trump seems to claim otherwise.
Taking away our freedom to control our bodies, the freedom to become a mother through IVF like I did.
We want to make it easier for mothers and families to have babies, not harder. That includes supporting the availability of fertility treatments like IVF in every state in America. Like the overwhelming majority of Americans, including the vast majority of Republicans, conservatives, Christians, and pro-life Americans, I strongly support the availability of IVF for couples who are trying to have a precious baby.
Joining me now is Sky News host of the US Report and my Outsiders co-host, James Morrow. James, there was a great deal of vitriol at the Democratic National Convention, a lot of lies. But what sort of a boost did it give the Democrats? And who do I believe there? Because I'm hearing two very different accounts about the Republican stance on IVF and Donald Trump's stance on IVF.
Well, Donald Trump laid it out right there. And there's this whole thing that the Democrats are trying to lean into this idea that the Republicans have some whole plan to ban abortion, that Donald Trump is a huge social conservative on that score. I mean, like, if you look at Donald Trump in his personal life, I just don't think that he's a kind of a meddle in the bedroom with government kind of guy. But the thing is that the Democrats, they are leaning very much into the whole abortion reproductive rights issue simply because for them, they've decided to rebrand themselves as the party of freedom. And yet this is literally the only thing where they want to remove restrictions on anything. The Democrats are all about creating new rules, new bureaucracies, new restrictions on all sorts of human activities. I mean, right down to, the shower head you use and what you use to cook your food and what car you drive to work and all of this sort of thing. So there's a real double game they're playing there. And the thing is, they can get away, though, with these sort of lies about what the GOP platform is because they are not being fact-checked on this at all. The press doesn't care. The press is carrying water for them, and they say, oh, well, like, whatever. Our job now is to get Harris over the line.
That seems to be the number one priority for the overwhelming majority of the US media. They're not even shy about it. It's North Korean style antics, really. It's the sort of thing you would expect from state media in North Korea. Now, let's talk about Robert F. Kennedy endorsing Trump. I'm still unsure about what this will mean for the Trump campaign. I don't think you can expect to see all his supporters simply switching to Trump. Maybe, I know some of them won't even bother voting. But before I get your analysis, let's listen to Kennedy explain why he left the Democrats.
It had become the party of war, censorship, corruption, big pharma, big tech, big ag, and big money. When it abandoned democracy by canceling the primary to conceal the cognitive decline of the sitting president, I left the party.
The party of war, censorship and corruption. James, what impact will Kennedy's endorsement have?
Well, I think what it's going to do, the analysis that I've seen shows that Kennedy voters will probably break about 3-2 for Trump. So there's a small boost there. In some of those swing states, it could make quite a difference, of course, because, it's like with our marginal electorates in Australia, this is where it actually matters. It's not about the popular votes, but getting over the line in different states. But what Kennedy said there was a complete break with the Democratic Party. And I think the diagnosis that he made was largely correct. I mean, it is, as I suggested before, the Democrats who really are all about, controlling the narrative, controlling the media, controlling social media, controlling what people can say, controlling what people can think, whether it's through wokeness and political correctness and HR, or whether it is through more sinister things we've seen, like, the way the White House worked with Twitter before it was owned by Elon Musk and Facebook to dial down stories that were unflattering to the Biden family and stories about COVID and things like that. So Kennedy is really right there. I mean, he's basically taking a kind of a libertarian position, possibly on some things he'll be, further out there on a lot of other things. But, I kind of am not hugely bothered by that because he doesn't have an official position. He's throwing his support to Trump. And if you want to talk about bonkers positions, just look at the Democrat Party platform, which Kamala Harris has inherited.
Well, look at her VP pick and his track record, never mind hers. But again,
correct.
The media are uninterested in really scrutinising any of that. In fact, they've gone out of their way to rebrand Kamala as some amazing leader when a couple of months ago, she was the problem. She was one of the Biden White House's biggest problems. How long will this honeymoon last, though? Because there has to be a point where you would hope that questions would be asked about her track record, her performance, what she really stands for, because we're getting, again, this play where she's the tough prosecutor, but then we know the state of California and law enforcement there and the impact she had whilst she was AG. So, yeah, I mean, that's at odds with her being a law and order figure. How are they going to bamboozle the American people all the way to November.
Well, they're using the vibe. This is all politics of the vibe. It is the vibe of the thing, as we say in Australia. You know, this is the thing. They are basically actively avoiding doing anything that might break this spell, the spell of, you know, joy, and the other people are weird, you know, and all this kind of mean girl in-group high school politics, which is basically what it comes down to, what they're trying to practice here. It's now, I think, it's the 26th of August. They had said a couple of weeks ago that Kamala Harris would do a sit-down interview by the end of the month. Well, the end of the month is coming up on us fast. I don't see the media much, except for a few people, really baying for that sort of scrutiny. I don't think they want to give her that scrutiny, because Kamala Harris, as soon as she starts to talk off script, you know, and has to start defending things. And we're talking about things like, you know, price controls. She floated that the other day. Taxes on your unearned or unrealized capital gains, which is bonkers. Higher corporate taxes, and a lot of stuff in the DNC platform, including things like basically a huge amnesty program for illegal aliens to get them to become eventually citizens, and you would assume Democrat voters. She's going to have to own all that. She's going to have to answer that. She's also running away from debates. I don't even know if they're going to wind up doing one with Trump now, when Trump had, I think, agreed to 3 with Biden. So that's where we are. Early voting is going to start in some of these states soon. So this is really, it's just, you know, a last quarter of the game, running out the clock, hoping that they can get over the line. But it's really sinister. And Rita, these are the people who keep banging on about threats to democracy, right? Well, I don't see them really engaging with this in the spirit of democracy at all.
Well, they invalidated 14 million votes when they installed Kamala and ran Biden out of town. So that's a pretty big threat to democracy right there, undermining the democratic process. Now, you mentioned fact-checking sites and how they take the day off whenever the Democrats say something. And that seems to be the case here with PolitiFact, insisting that Donald Trump, well, they haven't taken the day off. They've gone out of their way to find something false that is actually true. They're saying that Donald Trump is false to assert that Kamala Harris ever supported abolishing the Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE as we call it. But even CNN reported on her support for that in 2018. Have a look.
Abolish ICE. This is a refrain that we've heard increasingly from your Democratic colleagues, some even potential 2020 contenders like Bernie Sanders, Senator Kamala Harris, Senator Elizabeth Warren, Senator Kirsten Gillibrand. They've all called to abolish ICE.
Who is fact-checking the fact-checkers? But this is a case with a range of policies, isn't it, James? Fracking, for example, which is a massive issue in the crucial swing state of Pennsylvania. She's on the record. There's so many videos of her saying, I would ban fracking on day one. And now, apparently, she's done a complete 180. Again, is that credible?
Well, it's not credible. And, you know, Rita, there's another example of this. We had this a couple of weeks ago, when everybody was saying, you know, Kamala Harris, you were the border czar. Joe Biden named you the border czar. Your responsibility was to deal with stuff at the southern border. She never went and visited the southern border. And then, you know, once she started getting called on that, you suddenly had the press go in on a full court press saying, oh, no. She was never the border czar. When thankfully the internet hasn't gone full 1984 yet, and you can still go back and find, you know, all the same outlets, NBC, CNN, all these guys saying, you know, Kamala Harris named border czar by Joe Biden. You know, this is back in 2020 or 21. And then, of course, she did absolutely nothing. Remember, Rita, when she was asked about why she hadn't been to the border that time, and she said, well, I've never been to Europe either. I mean, this is, you know, like, this is what we're dealing with. That's why they don't want to put her in front of the press. But the press also doesn't want to have her put in front of them, because they might actually have to ask a hard question.
Well, the press, you would think, would at least try to be a little bit more balanced after the debacle of, being exposed about lying about Biden's cognitive decline. Because, again, for 3.5 years, if not more, They presented any doubts about Biden's cognitive abilities as right-wing conspiracies and disinformation and a threat to democracy until that infamous debate where suddenly for about 2 weeks they actually did their job. Now I want to ask you about a piece you wrote that has inspired a fairly bizarre response, I would say, from the editor of New Matilda, Chris Graham. He's taking issue with your piece on Labor's immigration policy, where you use data from the IPA to illustrate how Labor is bringing in a tsunami of migrants, 1.15 million since they took power under a Big Australia by Stealth program. Chris Graham wrote, the author of the IPA report is a man named Dr. Kevin Yu. And speaking of you, if you, like me, saw that surname and thought to yourself, you sound pretty migranty to me, you'd be correct. Here's a photo of Dr. Yu. He's from South Korea, now living in Sydney. And here's a bonus punchline. The author of the Daily Telegraph story is their National Affairs editor, James Morrow. Morrow is also an immigrant. Well, this is very interesting, James. I think New Matilda seem to think migrants to this country are obligated to support open borders, big Australia. I mean, what sort of...
Well, I mean, yeah, Rita, they caught me out here. Yes, you couldn't tell by my voice and constant talk about New York that I actually don't come from here. But, this was a really bizarre hit or attempted hit by these guys. Because if you think about it, what does the left always say? Oh, well, we're all immigrants to this country, unless we're, Aboriginal or Indigenous. We're all migrants to this country, and so we don't really have any sort of standing here. And then suddenly, it's sort of like they're running the whole, we grew here, you flew here line on myself and the doctor from the IPA who did the numbers. They can't, by the way, Rita, criticize the numbers. The numbers are 100% spot on that more migrants have been brought in under this term of government than in any other previous term of government, in a century. So the numbers are completely correct. So what do they do on the left? Well, they attack the person who's saying it. And they say, oh, well, you don't have the right to talk about that because you're a migrant. Well, I'll tell you something. The reason why, Rita, I talk about migration and a lot of other issues in this country and am involved in public life here is because I'm a migrant and I love this country and I want to keep it great. I want to see it become greater.
Well, it's such a lefty tactic, isn't it?
Totally.
Don't dispute the data. Just say you're not allowed to hold that opinion because, like you said, you flew here, I grew here. I just found it just the most bizarre piece. James Morrow, thank you for your time this evening.
Thanks, Rita.